Good evening, everybody. Let's get started. My name is Tom Madshoff. I teach in the Government Department and the School of Foreign Service. And I'm also the head of something called the Initiative on Religion, Politics, and Peace at Georgetown. I'm very happy to be able to welcome tonight Eugene Goussikindey of the Society of Jesus, who's visiting us from Nairobi, and will be speaking on the topic of peace as a matrix of convergence between religion and politics. Let me give you a little background on how this evening came about. This is a series of 3 talks that Reverend Goussikindey is giving this week, embedded in a series of 3 visits by Jesuits from the developing world to Georgetown this semester. The talks, the events, are being sponsored by the initiative that I mentioned, but also the Woodstock Theological Center under the leadership of Father Lubiando. But what makes it all possible is the support of the Jesuit community here at Georgetown. Usually, just about every year, there's a visiting professor funded by the Jesuit community who lands in one of the departments and takes part in our intellectual and social life. Our intellectual life here at Georgetown. And this year we have a different model. The funds were made available to bring scholars and practitioners, people working on issues of development, issues of peace, issues of interreligious understanding in the developing world to Georgetown for shorter stays, but shorter stays full of activities. So I want to recognize the Jesuit community and thank it for its support for the event tonight and the series of events I just alluded to. Now to the pleasurable task of introducing Eugene Goussikindey, who is a leading African scholar of peace studies and international relations, who really has a very interesting background. I'll give you just a bit of an overview. He was born in Cameroon, grew up in Benin, went to school in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, joined the Jesuit order in 1982, subsequently got a master's in philosophy from the University of Montreal, a master's and a PhD in theology from the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto. He began to teach at Hekima College, a Jesuit institute in Nairobi, in 1999. Hekima College is part of what is called the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, so a regional institution. And since 2003, Reverend Goussikindey has been the rector of the Jesuit community there. He is a scholar of many diverse interests, has published in a variety of different areas, both in theology, systematic theology, and Christology. There you will see a bridge to his interest in interreligious questions, but also on issues of peace and international affairs. He's published in French primarily, but also in English. I'll just give you the names of some of the books where his work has appeared. Overcoming Violence, a Faith-Based Perspective, Church-State Relations, a Challenge for African Christianity, and something in a more theological vein, Doing Theology and Philosophy in the African Context. He's editor of Africa Yetu, which is a biannual journal put out by the Society of Jesus in Africa. And I think most important or significant for our gathering here, and one reason why we're particularly happy that Reverend Goussikindey can be with us, he founded the Hekima Institute of Peace Studies and International Relations in Nairobi, which is a very important institute doing important work, not just on the intellectual side, but also on the practical side, teaching peace-building skills to a younger generation of Africans. Reverend Goussikindey, you're no stranger to Georgetown and Woodstock. You've been here before, and we're very happy to welcome you back. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom and God, for making possible for me to exchange with you some ideas. And today I kind of concentrate on peace, politics, and religion. Yeah, my background and has to try to set it up a bit, but I would say there are some practical elements that help me or push me toward the reflection on peace. It's true, I'm born in Cameroon, but when I was born, it was during this insurrection. So my mother had to find a way to die to the hospital where the bullet was going around. So I think that I survived the first possible difficult time to come into life. And in '92, when I joined the society, the provincial find that it was important that I get an experience, because there were no Jesuits in Benin in those days, and he sent me to Chad in N'Djamena. The war has just ended. There was a civil war there, and there was some African peacekeeping around with Mr. Goussikindey as the head of state of the transition. But a few months after I entered, Hissène Habré succeeded to take over the city. So I have to have a second experience of the context of war. But that was not all in the Society of Jesus. When I finished my philosophy, we usually have 2 years somewhere as experience in the Jesuit, and we call it regency. So the provincial sent me into northern Chad, Abéché, for my 2-year experiences. But before I arrived to Abéché, by the time I landed in N'Djamena, the Libyan planes were gunned down over N'Djamena, and one succeeded to shoot some few things at the airport in Abéché. So there were a question mark to know if I have to continue for my regency in Abéché. Finally, the provincial decided that it may be safer for me to go to Burkina Faso for my regency. And on my way to Burkina Faso, I missed my connecting flights in Niger, and the following day, Sankara was killed, and I could not enter into Ouagadougou immediately. So I have to wait a couple of days for the frontier to be opened before I enter into Ouagadougou, where one captain was trying to kind of sustain the insurrection, but it has not lasted. And finally, when I finished my studies in Montreal, I was sent to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Mobutu was just ousted and Kabila father were on power. So before I finished my stay there, they were fighting again, and the major fighting that involved Zimbabwe, Angola, and all these. So I do experience once again some kind of situation of conflict personally. Only the time spent in Nairobi was a little more quiet in terms of the situation of conflict. And by the time I finished, before I moved to the Club Institute, where I am now for my sabbatical, I spent 3 months in Abidjan teaching in our scholasticate, and the strike is still going on in Abidjan. So those experiences has fashioned somehow my own wish to see something different happening on the continent. That has been somehow what pushed me and others to initiate within the continent a center for reflection and then be able to understand our crisis. So far that was for the practical side, but tonight I will be a little more theoretical, and you can excuse me because I want to, having experienced all that and looking for solution, sometimes you need to set up the foundation for your thoughts in such a way that from that foundation you can build something, and that things can have practical consequences. So that's why I'm talking tonight. I'll be quite brief in order to give room for exchange and discussion. I'm talking about peace as a matrix of convergence between religion and politics. Religion and politics are normally back in the headlines. And even today, when I was reading this morning the Washington Post, I find in the corner an article entitled "Public Officials Under God." It was an article about a document soon to come, and it's a document about a state of principle by 55 Catholic Democrats in the US House of Representatives, and they were reflecting on their faith and their responsibility in political life. So probably once it will be out, it will generate new discussions among both the Catholics and the politicians to know what part faith plays in the political life and how those who are responsible can live their faith and yet have to deal with the wider public that is not only Catholic but precisely of one faith. But this is a mild a picture of religion and politics. Vivid and contrasting images has been both put forward in our minds and in our hearts by the media recently. Vivid because since 9/11, the portrayal of politics and religions is rather that of violence, which we see often in the media. It's an impression. I say an impression, I don't know how much one can attest or objectively found it that there is a religious violence that is going on around. And just look at what is going actually in Iran. So there is a serious problem to know what do we do or how do we conceptualize the relation between politics and religion in such a way that they can converge, at least for me, with regard to peace. Two major tendencies seems to be at play today, and I can kind of recapitulate them in two books. I'm not going to expose the whole content of those books, but one can be the one entitled Sacred and Secular, Religion and Politics Worldwide, and has been written by Pete Norris and certain Ronald Engelhardt. The basic idea in that vision is that secularization is still moving forward, and perhaps at the end it offers to the society a better environment. Basically, it creates a human existential security, and also it offers a space for equality and also human development in such a way that if one looks at the full development of a community, the tendency toward secularization would be the best. Yet, there is another book that has been published, probably somewhere around this place, by Gillen and Wilcox, and entitled Religion and Politics in Comparative Perspective. There seems to indicate that religion has not weakened. Rather, it is increasingly becoming a vital force in society and politics, not just here, but around the globe. So with these two perspectives, we seem to have a very strong assertion either on the role of religion as the growing role, and then that of politics that may help if it's given a chance beyond the religious interference. In what I'm going to say, or what I'm intending to share with you this afternoon is basically an attempt to construct religion and politics in such a way that they converge. So it's a deliberate reconceptualization of politics and religion in such a way that we have the possibility to understand them as needing each other, and, or more precisely, should stand in critical dialogue. There are many definitions of religion, and perhaps of politics also. If you take a sociological perspective, you have a number of measurable criteria that has been set, either looking at value and beliefs, or how people participate in the practices that are said to be religious, attending worship, affirming that they are praying. But you can also take an anthropological orientation, and that would bring you to explore more and more either the cultural dimension, or more specifically, you would explore the relation to meaning. And someone like Clifford Geertz has given an orientation to that. Philosophers has been discussing religion more and more in terms of faith and knowledge, and the polarity of how much you can know when you come to religious affirmation, and if it's really on the objective side, or someone like Kant would say that beyond the bound of sense, we cannot know much more. And the religious critically are usually beyond the bound of sense. Theologians like me, or those who are much more inclined to theological vision, would go further by saying religion is simply not something of this world. They would use a more technical word by saying it is a result, if you want, of revelation. In other words, it is based on the fact that God willed it himself, making the whole idea more complex. Because of peace, that is my concern, I'm giving now a definition or an understanding of religion and politics that will help. So this is what I really contend religion is. It won't fit basically neither entirely the sociological, the anthropological, or even the theological, but I put it this way. I see religion as the public institutional expression and promotion of the spiritual dimension of a person as a member of a community. Let it again. I see religion as a public institutional expression and promotion of the spiritual dimension of a person as a member of a community. It calls for some very few comments. I'll do it very briefly. The idea of public institutional expression intends essentially to display any reduction of religion to an occult activity, that is, a secretive activity. I believe that even where there are initiations, religion is always, or would always have, a public manifestation. The institutional expression then reinforced the idea of an open dimension of religion. So religion is not an anonymous business. Religion somewhere, somehow, should be accounted for in society. So this is the idea that is behind. At least this is the first comment I have to make. The second comment is that religion, in that view, is not a private business. Even if it involves the spiritual dimension of the person, it is precisely because it's not a private business that it is viewed, or I try to view it, or view the person as a member of a community. Individuals do develop their spiritual dimension, but they never do it from nothing. It's like language. we can master and transform it, but we always receive it somehow. And the last comment I want to make on religion, before coming to my expression on politics, is that the institutional expression is also at the origin of the differences in religions. By institutional expression, I want to understand what I call the extra demand put on individual or community by the religious structure in view of their fulfillment. This extra demand can just be rituals that they perform, going to Sunday Mass, or doing the rituals, or being baptized. These are extra demand, like I said, put on. They can also just be exercise, like for those who are in Buddhism and others, you can just have your spiritual journey by praying, by making some exercise in order to achieve an internal, goal. Probably in many cases, some ethical requirements may be part of such demand. They constitute what I would say the ideals and values of the community, which now inform the individuals and transmit meaning to them. So religion, if I put it briefly, has a significant grip on individuals and community within a larger society. Basically, this is the assertion that is implied in that definition. I believe that it can be applied to Christianity, as Islam, Buddhism, as well as African religion and Judaism. Now, politics, basically I want to kind of recast it quickly so that I can go on to explain a little more the convergence. It is understood usually as the science and art of government, the science dealing with norms, organization, or administrations. But I really want to understand it a bit differently. By politics, I think of a structured organization of a geographical space into the social space, according to laws and responsibility in view of the common good, that is the welfare of all the members of that society. Once again, it's a structured organization of the geographical space into a social space according to laws and responsibility in view of the common good of all members of the society. This called three brief comments also. The first comment is that the relation between the geographical space, I choose it deliberately, and the social space is important in understanding politics, I believe. It means that the conversion or transformation of the geographical space into a social space implies that one is dealing with people. Politics is not about the no man's land. No man's land, when you are at least, probably when you travel by air, you won't realize it. But if you go by car and you are crossing one boundaries of a nation to another, the two boundaries are needed together. There's a space in between that belongs to no one. And it is not ruled, in other words. The no man's land is not ruled, it's just there. So I just want to say it's not a no man's land. Basically to foster the idea that an organized space is an intrinsic dimension of politics. That's what I want to bring in. So the idea of structural organization tends to emphasize that they are level also of organization. And then they could be articulated through either the separation of powers, if you want, legislative, judicial, all that. But the structured organization also means that there is an internal cohesion in an organization of a space, of the social space or the policy. There have to be an internal organization that is coherent. And finally, there are different ways to structure the space into social. So you may give the possibility to some places to have a kingdom or a parliamentary democracy or a republic. This is not the matter for me, but the most important in understanding is this movement from a geographical space into structured social space. The law and responsibility implies that in politics, there is no exemption of duty. There's always a duty. And the fundamental duty is toward the welfare of everyone who belong to that space. Laws intend to promote and safeguard the common good, and all members without discrimination has to have a kind of protection somewhere. So each one has his own responsibility as a member of the society, but still some are entrusted with responsibility to overseeing the overall welfare. So far, that is my attempt, perhaps drawing too much from my bit of philosophical background and the need of having the social dimension, where the two can just move on. That leads to that kind of articulation. So this is because peace, for me, at the end of the day, is about people. Whether we comprehend people as a group or individual, when we talk about peace, at the end of the day, it's about people. So I'm giving now a very brief, because peace is about people, I want to make that now a kind of short comparison between religion and peace, or how the two are connected, and later on a very short one also between peace and politics, and then finally give peace as the matrix of convergence. So I have these two particles. Religion and peace, as I said at the beginning, many images has come to us and give us the impression that religion nowadays foster or encourage or even nourish violence. This is really the impression that we have. From Kaduna in Nigeria, just having a cartoon that will bring the death of more than 100 people, it's a problem. To Tokyo, you can remind us of time where gas nerve has been found in the subway. To Belfast, to London, and even here at some time, Oklahoma City, the bombing. All give an impression that violence is almost embedded in religion. And in fact, there is a book that seems to suggest that. Mark Jürgens wrote a book entitled Terror in the Mind of God. And he deliberately, I suppose, quote Exodus 23:27 as, how do you call it, front page epigraph. And really, Exodus read this: I will send my terror before you, and I will throw into confusion all the people. So give an impression that it is even from within God that this recommendation is emerging. I'm really a little more reluctant to view that religion in itself would be, would foster a violence. Rather, what I believe, and I will go a little more shortly now here, is that if you look at religion, usually they tend, most of them, to posit at the beginning of humanity harmony. And that harmony is broken somewhere. And the religious context try to recast that initial harmony. In Christianity, it's very clear from the Genesis. But in some traditional religion in Africa, you have the original myth in our places of a big harmony between God and human being, and then there have been some discrepancy, and then he kind of moved away. The idea points at human being as responsible somehow. In other words, there is an inner violence within human beings that religion at the beginning tried to contain. At least this may be one of the big theses of someone like René Girard in Violence and the Sacred, tending to kind of show that the purpose, because he analyzed sacrifices, he tried to show that the purpose of religion, or mainly sacrifice, is to restore the harmony of the community and to reinforce the social fabric. So that would be the role of religion. And I believe that most religion has mechanism to resolve conflicts, or at least rights to reconcile people. And that indicates that religion does not simply breed violence, but in fact, it has within itself mechanisms and rights that promote reconciliation, and as such, we cannot incriminate religion as such being the origin of violence. We may have to find it somewhere in human hearts somehow. Now, I believe that if it is true that religion fosters somehow the well-being of the community through that, it does have some kind of original relation to violence because it tends to contain it. Perhaps it's contented much more within the frame of that particular society. And if you move outside, it may create some other problem. I believe that politics has almost the same ambivalent relation to violence and peace. The emergence of a political community, as I say, movement from geographical to social, is always or often occur through subjugation of some people or group of people. We know very well that empires are often set up by conquest. And to maintain themselves, they have to be ready to fight. In other words, maintain an apparatus of war. And in many places, independence, including here, and freedoms are often gained through confrontation, perhaps violent confrontation. So politics, I want to say, start with pacification. But pacification is an ambiguous term that encompasses the idea of peace, but it's also shrouded the idea of peace in the possibility that pacification may occur through military coercion or through a kind of securing through diplomacy or talk people who are having divergent ideas. They can bring them together that way. So, in politics, there is a deliberate effort also to bring people together, but that effort also includes sometimes some kind of coercion somewhere. And coercion is not always a peaceful means that is taken. So if the two, I'm coming to this, are really geared to bring a community together, religion to build a community and politics also to build the community, then I feel that they should normally work together. Especially when peace is concerned, I really believe that none of them should believe that it has a monopoly on the totality of human beings. Those who made their community, they don't have a kind of monopoly over them. And so it is important that both then come together and kind of discuss and collaborate. And I have very luckily a recent expression of it in, I would say, a light from a dark corner. For us, a dark corner when the World Bank and the IMF come to our place is usually very difficult. They are not always bringing light. But for once, in reading the report, I really find that there is the light coming from them. There is a book called Mind, Heart, and Soul in the Fight Against Poverty. And it's produced by the World Bank. And I just want to have an extensive quote. It is Catherine Marshall and Lucy Keogh who did it. and I just want to quote somewhere on page 2 and 3. It says this: in the development world, awareness that multifaceted and complex process underlie economic and social change has arisen markedly. What at what time seemed a distinct and relatively simple process of linear, predictable, and manageable process is now more clearly seen as a complex kaleidoscope of social change that take different forms in different parts of the world. Each challenge to development, whether ensuring stability in the financial sector, boosting food crop production, or reducing infant mortality, depend critically on human motivation and institution. It continues, often even at the grassroots level. Likewise, and this is very important and interesting side for me, the missions and lives of religious leaders as shepherds of a flock might once have seemed relatively straightforward and gear more toward spiritual well-being. But more recently, however, the need to foster community and temporal well-being is also widely accepted as falling within the purview of religious leaders and organizations, and sometimes challenge traditional belief and previously accepted notions of social change. The world that appeared to be dividing the realm of faith community from the secular and pragmatic world of economic crumbled, faced with the gamut of issues that fall under the heading of social justice. End of quote. Basically what he's saying is there is a new configuration where the understanding of the role of the religious leaders and religion should be more complex than just dealing with spiritual being. Just as I would say the role of the political leaders as working for the material well-being should be seen much complex, and they cannot shut out some of the moral or ethical demands that would come from the religious side. They should be able to care for it also, I believe. That's why I say there should be a convergence. So instead of seeing religion as absolutely superior to politics, or to see politics as a superior to religion and subordinating religion to politics, or simply separating both of them in a radical distinction in such a way that they can be distinct and mutually independent, I would prefer the idea that they are standing in critical relation. They stand in critical relation. And I think that when I say critical relation, it's quite simple, because I believe sometimes a prophetic voice can come from religion and remind politics that the weak and the vulnerable are also members of the society. Just as religious and religion leaders can call upon politics and remind that abuse of human rights and discrimination are not helping all the subjects of the same society. Redistribution of the wealth or social solidarity can also be called upon, and religious can do that, reminding politics that they have to take care of everyone. Moral values and that strengthen the social fabric can also be an area where religion can call upon politics in a critical voice. And I also believe that politicians or politics can also help the religions to live a certain tolerance of diversity, because they are used to multi-party kind of games where there are diversity. So they probably should be able to teach religions that there is that a possibility also. They should also be able to give some of the religion the sense of democratic procedures, because there's not always within those religions democratic procedures, and I think politicians can be able to do it. And I think that the welfare of all as a universal vision can be taught by politicians to religion, because religions are usually dear to their own community. So I believe that these are areas where a very fruitful dialogue can be. And lastly, for the academic people, there are some area of dialogue I feel academic people should fill in and show some kind of convergence. I think the experience of South Africa and others after the apartheid, where the idea of reconciliation moved from a religious background and become a political tool to bring the community together and go beyond the past, has opened an avenue for concepts like reconciliation to become part and parcel of political agenda. That in cases of trouble and peace, we can think about religion and we can think about reconciliation. And the notion needs to be deepened in order to make it affordable within the political realm. Such is also the idea of forgiveness and probably the idea of healing a divided community. I think politicians can work for healing of divided community. I think that is very important to find a mechanism to do it. And probably one can also explore ideas like covenants that can bound the community together. And the political community needs something that brings everyone, in spite of their different belonging, together and cements them as one community. And the idea of covenant can be re-explored more deeply for political use. So let me come to the end and simply say what I said at the beginning. The quest for peace, that is at the origin of the emergence of political structure as the emergence of religion, I believe can be this crossroad where politics and religion can meet and even deliberately converge and work together so that the welfare or the well-being of everyone can be attained and the fulfillment of the community achieved. So thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. I'll call you Eugene. Eugene, we're done with the formal introductions. For that really optimistic vision, but optimistic vision that recognizes the complexities, the hatreds and the violence in both these realms, politics and religion, while looking for ways out or ways forward. And we have some time for discussion, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, so why don't folks raise your hands if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, maybe identify yourself, whether you're a student, faculty, and so on. And should I call on folks? Marilyn?
I'm a faculty. My name is Marilyn McMorrow. And at the beginning, you spoke about secularization as a possibility for free development of persons. And that just made me wonder the extent to which you would say secularization is a phenomenon in Africa. And you ended by reminding us about Desmond Tutu's, No Future Without Forgiveness. And when we read that book, he says they started with hymns, they lit candles, and I was in awe when I read that book. And I wondered if that only could have happened in a group that had some kind of shared religious. So I guess I'm wondering the extent to which you see secularization at work in African society, and is there sort of a blend between the religious and secular forces in your experience in the countries you've lived in?
It depends where you are in Africa. The French-speaking African country has inherited a very strong line from the colonial master. where religion and politics is really so strong that even at the university level, you will not find a department of religious studies in the university. It's just not in, because it's very sharp. It's very sharp. So what usually happens there is people tend, or the politicians tend to tell the religious leaders and others that your role is on the pulpit and you have to care for souls. And my idea is that the souls are not just virtual bodies or reality somewhere. They are social, concrete human beings, and they should. And in fact, beside the rhetoric outside, there is a lot of relation between politics and religion in most of the African countries, because the religious leaders and others are usually the most vocal or attentive to what is going on. So they express themselves usually very fiercely, kind of very forcefully. But the movement of secularization as trying to see that religion is on the corner is not absent. But I would say, from my experience, it's more vivid in the Francophone areas than in the English-speaking area. But yet, even in Nairobi, when they were dealing with the referendum and others, some were not happy about the way the religious leaders tend to get involved into that process. But I would say it is probably less than what people experience in Europe, because in spite of everything, people are still quite religious in the continent, in spite of all the experience, even in the West. It's still part of the life of people.
I really like your, I'm Jessica, a grad student in the government department. And my question is, I really like your idea of how to allow for more pluralism and tolerance in the religious realm, and how it can learn that from politics. I was just wondering about situations like in DRC or in Uganda, where these animist religions or these cult-like religions have a very violent and political or outcome, even if it's not manifested in the form of militia. There's beliefs in witchcraft which create a lot of violence in communities. And do you have any ideas on how you could practically address this with your approach?
Yeah. In DRC, there have been quite a lot of the religion involvement, especially from the group that are kind of resisting. Let's take the eastern part of Congo. The idea, when religion gets into it, I really believe that usually what people heard is that they use some of the religious ritual pretending to protect themselves. For example, that if you shoot, a bullet will not kill you, and there's a number of things that goes on. But I still believe that there is, it's not violence coming from religion, but I would say some of them are conflicts that one needs to study very carefully. It cannot be on territorial. It can also be the past conflict between ethnic that take a new turn because there are new means of fighting. And when people have new means, like new arms and others, they fight more, how do you call it? The consequences are more visible, they kill more. And if we take the case, for example, of the Lord Resistance Army in northern Uganda, I'm not sure how much religion is, but I would say it gives them a motive to address the situation of perhaps one has to look at it very closely that in some nations, groups are probably set aside. Not everyone is properly cared for. And so some tribes may feel that they have been put aside in overall political transformation that is going on. And so they find a motive to fight, and sometimes these motives are blended with claim of religion. There is not much or lot of religion in the Lord with this resistance army, at least for what I know. But then they still use the capacity to use rituals and take it as a motive for fighting. But there is a social reality behind that I'm not sure how much we actually people partake in the actual transformation of Uganda. I'm not sure. It has to be looked at it closely. I'm not sure if
Hello, I'm Scott Jokanovic. I'm with Dr. McMorrow and Dr. Banshoff with the Initiative for Religion, Politics, and Peace. And I have a question more specifically because in the field of economic development, at least in the very few readings that I've done, it seems that many people always propose these otherwise, for the developed world, what seem backward policy proposals to develop an industry within a nation. Therefore, I can understand that, for instance, the World Bank issuing the fact that, yes, religion and politics need to converge in developing nations to cultivate communities, but do you perceive a long-term policy approach that seeks secularization? Because, for instance, I mean, some development economic policies promote import and export substitution. They promote protectionism to build the markets in there. I mean, is that sort of commensurate also with the development of a spiritual community and long-run secularization for development and political peace?
When I read this book, I'm clear in my mind that it's not just a question for developing world. And I really believe very strongly that even here, perhaps the focus of the World Bank was on development, and then the economic dimension have taken off. But I think that religion covers a spectrum of issues. Development would be one of them, and you take here, it will be other criteria. I think there is a possibility, like when I was trying to read this issue, if take something that happened here, which the media take about politicians to whom the clergy say, okay, we don't back you because your views are not the views of our faith. And that person would not succeed in the coming election. It does mean a lot. And one cannot simply resolve it by believing that much more secularization would get rid of such problems. Those issues will come again and again. And for the simple reason that human hearts or human beings are much more than what you promote from the side of development. There's always an inner dimension, I call it. Whatever you want to feel at inner now, and you can call it spiritual or others, but I think there's an inner dimension of human being that always is in call for something greater. And then that something greater may be expressed in ideals that will take ethical modality within a certain society. But I believe that even in developed world, people are coming back again. I talk, probably I didn't come on, but you know the story that happened in France with the burning of cars and others. Suddenly people feel that, okay, they were coming to a certain level where religion has no impact, and this come out. And the leaders that try to solve it move toward initially curfew and then set up very strong law of if you do it, I will imprison you or this. but it has not solved the problem. Everyone knows that it is much deeper than simply putting young people in prison. You have to find a way to address the problem. It may be social, but it may also be that they want an expression of the inner light of themselves to recognize a plural society. I think the challenge of the first world is to resolve the problem of a multicultural society where plurality is a fact. And people, most of your laws and our laws affirm the freedom of these religious practices. So if it's affirmed, people have to find a way to express it. And by expressing it, you also find a dissent that may occur somewhere. And you have to handle that dissent. So I believe that dialogue, I say critical dialogue, means the mutual enrichment of the various methodologies that exist either in the way religion relates to people or politics relate to people may help build a new society. And my own aim is always to see that whether it's a political option or religious, the end of the day is that the human being feel that is fulfilled in the world in which he's living. If it's not, he will rebel sometime.
I just wanted to ask a question about the conflict between the North and the South in Sudan. And I feel like Khartoum is kind of carrying out the victims and I think a lot of the perpetrators actually think it's a religious war, but it's been proven not to be a religious war. Is like Arabs versus the Christians. It's been proven that the victims on both sides are Islam and Christian, but a lot of the people think that it's a religious war, and Khartoum has made it look like, and it's been translated into Darfur as a religious war, but it's actually not. That both the Janjaweed and the Korean people are, the people in Darfur are Islam. So what do you have to say about people who think that they're victims of religious wars and it's not actually a religious issue?
I was in Nairobi when the last effort to broken peace in Sudan was done. And some of the people within the negotiating were teaching in our institution. Sudan's war is a very long story behind. It is religious and not religious. Or religious give motive to fight. Even if at the end of the day it won't be, but it does give some motive. You know, it's when we live in Africa, when we talk about like, there's always Muslim, but there's also a kind of subtle and difficult to express properly the relation between the Muslim world and the Arab, and like if you come to the side of Chad, they are Muslim also. And the Arab and the black African Muslim do not always, how do you call it, there are some tensions. I think that there is not always the religious view is not just the same. And if you study Islam in Black Africa, like from Senegal, going down to some of the part of Chad, their relation to how Islam is lived is quite different from what one learned and hear from the Arab living. And even some going to Mecca has had some unfortunate experiences when they were there. But still, sometimes it's when you talk about Islam and Islamism, they come together. But in southern Sudan, it's true that they were not like, in Khartoum, they were kind of not really taking care of the South. And they have been fighting for their own rights. And in the South, you have many groups. You have the Christian, but you also have the traditional Islam. So they probably join force together in order to have a separate way of being ruled. That is what the present agreement tends to validate, hoping that there will be a referendum in the years to come to know if they will really be separate entirely. But they have a time to. But in Southern Sudan, there has not been no roads, no major infrastructure in schools. So there's something real there.
Okay, we have time.
So looking at the example of the growing influence of religion in the political domain of really vast regions of the world, what is the Christian reaction to that? What are the trends in Christianity in Africa now? Are you being forced because of these realities or other realities to collaborate more with other Christian groups? What does the face of Christianity look like?
I would say that
In 2 minutes.
Okay, very simple is that, for example, in Benin and others, people, some government from South America and others are giving money to build things, and then the influence of Islam, they say that is kind of receive big mosques and other things. But in the heart of people, they are not. At least from Ghana, Benin, and Togo. In the south, that side, the tension is really not visible. Even if at certain time, some have tried to convert. The Nigeria case is a very special case. I have no, I cannot give a full understanding why in the northern part is more aggressive than, because we also have the Yoruba in the south, which are, so what happened last time in Maiduguri and they killed some people in the north, the reaction has been from the south, at least for some in Onisha, say, if we keep quiet, it gives a bad impression. So they went and then they react. Just to be affirming that, okay, they also are ready for that. Perhaps sometimes this type of strong opposition may generate a different, how do you call it, understanding. But I will say, generally, religion in Africa, especially the traditional religion, has never been a source of conflict. You worship there are many deities and you worship yours, and another worship is, we may be of the same family, but it is not our religious belonging that determine our relation. Is our family or ethnic belonging that is prior to our religious belonging. So you can have a family with a Muslim, a Christian, and then what brings them together is not religion. So religion is kind of second. But there is some versions of Islam that is more aggressive.
Well, thank you. This has been a great discussion. I think you can see there's a lot of interest in what's happening in Africa, and you did a wonderful job of linking that back to the observations you made in your presentation. I want to tell you all that you've been on small arms trafficking in Africa, so I invite you to RSVP for those if you're interested. We now have a chance to continue our discussion over some refreshments, so please join me in thanking our guests once again.